All right, well, welcome back, everyone. So today we have our fifth of the Alumni webinar series. Today we're joined by an excellent group of Wildcats. So we're going to hear about sustainable energy systems, but just for some context for our panelists, our fellows just finished their midterm presentations last week, so give them a little round of applause in the chat. They did an excellent job, and we're really excited to see their projects as they continue to progress throughout the summer. And to our panelists, I'm Kendall Gray, the Changemaker Collaborative Program Assistant. So I work with kind of the back end of our student-facing programming for the Sustainability Institute. A lot of my work has been around the fellowship. I was a fellow in the summer of 2019, working with the Energy Task Force and their Climate Action Plan, WildCap. And I remember looking at some of Jackie's work when I was a fellow. So it's cool to see you in person on screen now. So last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, we had an excellent panel that was sustainable agriculture and resilient food systems. So it'll be exciting to switch gears into the energy space today. So I'm going to pass it over to Cameron, who's going to do a little intro on himself and then introduce our moderator for the day.
Great, thanks, Kendall. Cameron Wake, I'm a research professor at the Institute for the Study of Earth, Oceans, and Space, and also the Josephine Lamprey Professor of Climate and Sustainability at UNH's Sustainability Institute, and I'm part of the group that helps organize the Sustainability Fellows. So it's really wonderful to be here today, and I'm really honored to introduce our moderator for today's session, Michael Berman. I've known Michael now for well over a decade, and he's worn a number of different hats in that time in the energy field. So it's a real joy to have him here because he brings a range of experience from running his own business with others at Revolution Energy, to being somebody who really helped take the New Hampshire Sustainable Energy Association up a notch, and now in his new role as Director of Offshore Wind Industry Development for the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority as part of the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. And Michael, you win for like longest title for sure. I've mentioned what he's done before. He also holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Conservation from the University of New Hampshire and a master's in environmental law from Vermont Law School. So with that, I'll pass it over. And I really just want to say we have a great set of panelists today, also all connections with UNH, and a broad range of people in terms of their length of time with experience in the energy field. So really looking forward to the discussion, and I'll join you again at the end for some closing thoughts. Michael, over to you.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much, Professor. It is wonderful to be here, and I'm glad that that Cameron mentioned my graduation from UNH. I was hoping that my 2005 number would be up here along with the rest of the panel, but that is definitely a proud area for me, and the fact that I still live in New Hampshire. I live in Dover, so right down the street from Durham, and it's fantastic to be part of continuing to move the state forward on sustainable energy in how we approach that issue now and obviously long into the future. And so it's a pleasure for me to participate in this way. And I do want to give a shout out to all the fellows for the presentations last week. I was able to catch a number of them, especially within this sort of the subject matter. And it seems like everyone's doing a fantastic job. So keep it up. And again, I'm very pleased and honored to be with my fellow alum on this panel to talk about their current experience with sustainable energy and sort of what they're involved in and the myriad of opportunities that are currently available within this subject. And, you know, I think just to briefly touch upon that, what is probably clear to most of us now is energy is really the lifeblood of our society, of civilization now. We are incredibly dependent upon these resources that provide us electrons, regardless of where they come from, for day-to-day operations. And we see that whenever there's an interruption within our current supply. And it's a very, very complicated system. You just look at the electric grid that we utilize. And that's by far one of the most complicated systems that human beings have ever created and developed. And our reliance upon that is really quite staggering. What that should expose to all of you is that that complexity requires inputs from a lot of different areas. And that whether we're dealing with generation sources of energy, trying to reduce the amount of energy that we're actually using, or anything that may not even seem like it's energy related. That's one of the things that I've experienced over the course of my academic and professional career, is that it takes everybody, and it takes knowledge from every type of source that you can imagine. So just because you may be a marketing student, it doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to participate in sustainable energy from a career perspective. As Professor Wake had noted, I've taken a lot of different directions to arrive at where I am today. A lot of focus on generation or supporting different clean tech generation sources, but it's a curvy road, and in a lot of ways, you're able to pave that road yourself if you're willing to put in the work. There's an enormous amount of opportunity within this field, and again, our panelists are going to be touching upon what road they've paved so far, and excited to hear about that. I will note really quick, just so we can stay on time, my current role with offshore wind. It's a very large and complex issue, very exciting. It's a burgeoning industry within the United States. It has been around in Europe for really the past 30 years. But what it's going to take to fully develop that technology here in the US involves a lot of moving parts. And I think, as New Hampshire moves forward, we will see more and more opportunities to become involved in what way you find interesting and feel you can make your impact in. And so we're just really at the beginning stages of that, in a very exciting technology that has a lot of spin-off opportunity from there as well. So with that, let me stop talking, and let me start to introduce our panel for today. So to begin with, I'm just gonna name everybody off, and then what I'd like each panelist to do is to provide a brief background on yourself, and then we can kind of launch into some discussion and really get some good questions moving forward. So first, I'd like to introduce Anthony Albano. He is an associate with Cadmus Environmental Protections Group, or Cadmus, that does a lot of really good work and is very known within the energy industry. And I'm going to go through everyone first real quick, and then we can start with Anthony from there. Jackie Kinson, who's a mechanical engineer at CDM Smith. And then finally, Matt LaRue, who is currently now the campus energy manager for the University of New Hampshire. And so with that, let's go ahead and start with Anthony, and then we'll go to Jackie and Matt to give a bit of a understanding of what you guys are up to.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael. So a little bit about me. I graduated from UNH back in 2013 with a Bachelor of Science degree in economics and a minor in business administration. Shortly after graduation, I interviewed with Cadmus, trying to get a job in their Boston office. And long story short, ended up working out of their Washington, DC office, and then transferring out to Denver, Colorado, where I am now. So it's been almost 8 years at Cadmus, which is pretty crazy to think about. Time definitely flies. But I think from a high level, I consider myself a clean energy consultant or a social good consultant. And so what that means is, helping support clean air, clean water, and clean energy. And my bucket is really in the clean energy sector. And so some of the things that I work on, I support the Department of Energy, the DOE, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. And so like Michael was talking about earlier, kind of on the energy front, it's, where does it come from? And for me, that's helping, push renewables and reducing the amount that we use. And for me, that's helping push forward energy efficiency. And so for the Department of Energy, I support their SolSmart program. I serve as a solar technical assistance provider. I've also supported their Solar Near Community program, which helps low income and nonprofits have access to renewable energy programs. And then for the EPA, I've been supporting their Energy Star program for the entire time I've been at Cadmus. And recently I've been supporting their portfolio manager initiative, which is a way for buildings to reduce their commercial, or to benchmark their energy in the hopes that they will then make changes and reduce their energy consumption. So that's just a little bit about me.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Sure.
Jackie, if you want to jump in and say a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Jackie. I am a mechanical engineer at CDM Smith, like Michael had announced. I graduated from the University of New Hampshire also in 2018 with a degree in chemical engineering with a focus on energy. I was a fellow in 2017, and I worked with the UNH Energy Office, where Matt actually is now. I worked with his predecessor. And from there, I stayed involved my senior year while at UNH and submitted a student video contest about the cogen plant to the International District Energy Association, where I ended up interning the next summer and got a full-time job with them working on industry data and really learning a lot about district energy as a whole in the industry sector. Being with an association, I was exposed to engineering services, vendors, system owners like UNH. They have a campus system and then they own it. And from there, I wanted to get back into my degree a little bit and work on really designing those energy systems, which brought me to CDM Smith, who was a member of IDEA. And with CDM Smith, I'm a building mechanical design engineer. So we provide HVAC and plumbing services for a variety of projects. CDM Smith is a consulting firm headquartered out of Boston, Mass, which is where I work. And they focus mostly on water, energy, transportation, and environmental projects. I'm focused in the energy sector, where I work on geothermal energy projects, and then I also help with water and wastewater treatment facilities and pumping stations, designing the HVAC and plumbing services for that as well. That's just a little bit about my background.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Jackie. That was perfect. And Matt, if you want to jump in, and you're hyper local at campus, so that we'd love to hear about what you're up to now.
Thanks, Mike. So I graduated from UNH in 2017 with a degree in environmental and resource economics and a dual degree in sustainability. The summer of 2017, I was also a fellow, and I was a campus and community climate resilience fellow. So there was actually two of us that summer, and we looked at planning for mapping resilience on campus. So it was sort of part of the president's climate commitment and sort of the last step that we were at the time towards achieving that. My first professional experience outside of school was actually doing estimating for a civil construction company. So I'm not related to the environmental field. I did that for about a year, and I realized that wasn't really sort of fulfilling in what I wanted to do. So I ended up getting a job at energy efficiency consulting company in Concord, New Hampshire, Resilient Buildings Group. And at Resilient Buildings Group, I worked with New Hampshire Utilities on the New Hampshire Saves program. So there I worked with a number of different stakeholders with the focus of helping commercial and industrial businesses be more energy efficient. So I work with everybody from manufacturers to consultants to construction managers. And so I was there for about 2.5 years, and this position opened up here at UNH as the campus energy manager. And so my role here kind of has a number of different hats. So it's really looking at sort of the supply side and then the consumption side of energy use here. So on the supply side, it's commodity purchase. So anything from electricity, processed landfill gas, natural gas, oil, biomass or wood chips, propane. And then, so that gets brought into campus and used in a number of different ways. And then on the consumption side, I oversee metering on campus. So campus has about 600 different sub-meters to all of our buildings that we oversee and make sure are functioning properly. And we use that data to then develop energy efficiency projects and communicate our progress to other stakeholders.
Terrific. Thank you, Matt. You got a lot going on. You all do, which is incredibly exciting. And what I'd love to try and understand from all of you, because in my experience, there's usually something that drives people to be in this industry, or that, is really why you do what you do and why you've sort of currently created the path you have, what kind of excites you in that. And if each of you could kind of touch upon that, right? Like, why are you getting up every day? Why did you choose to apply to the job that you're in? And what about that is important to you? I think that would be really interesting to understand. Anthony, if you want to jump in first.
Sure, I can start on that one. I mean, for me, it's fairly simple. It's the natural environment. So, I was born and raised in New Hampshire, grew up hiking in the White Mountains with my dad, camping, just enjoying nature. And as I started to grow up a little bit more and, learn about sustainability and how important it was to, kind of safeguard that natural environment, and realizing that I could have a career out of that, it just seemed like a no-brainer for me. So that's it for me.
Great.
I can kind of expand on that. Yeah. Same thing. I've always loved being out in nature and really taking advantage. I have always also been interested in clean energy. I think starting in high school when I took like AP Environmental, and it was really introduced, and that topic started to really take off. And it was a little bit of a challenge for me to figure out how to get involved into clean energy. I didn't know like what avenue I wanted to be involved in, more just relying on my love for like math and science. Ended up majoring in what I did, chemical engineering. And then in my college career, kind of focused on that energy aspect to just take different classes and take like study abroad experience that really focused on energy. And from there, I was able to be introduced to career options that I was able to, which is what led me to consulting engineering. I really wanted to be involved, not more on a policy level or talking like ideas or research. I really wanted to be designing those systems and getting those solutions on the ground and running and in construction. So I really like my position at a design firm where I'm actively designing the boreholes for the geothermal wells, looking at the energy loads of the building or the system as a whole, and then being able to size the equipment and make a design, stamp it, send it out to the client, and go through construction and be involved kind of step by step. It's a really good feeling to make sure that, okay, I'm putting in this work, I'm contributing to the clean energy industry, and feeling like I'm making a little bit part, not just relying on my interest in like sustainable energy systems.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because I admittedly real quickly, and then Matt, I'll have you jump in, have struggled with this idea of, I understand the necessity for the policy side and the legal implications of of the needs that we need to witness, and at the same time always crave this desire to be more hands-on with a project and go back and forth. And my career has gone back and forth depending on what the timing is and what I individually would like to help impact. And it's an important point to bring up. One that, it's great that you actually were able to identify that, sounds like pretty early. But that too, that there are all those sides to it, in that it's not closed off to where, again, where somebody would necessarily have to be an engineer in order to participate, because they could be more into one of those other areas that is also, really equally as important to work on and bring along, especially within this industry, to make it all happen. And so with that, Matt, what same question to you,
Yeah, so I would sort of echo what Anthony said in regards to the natural environment. So I grew up in a Bearbrook State Park in New Hampshire, so I was always in the woods and really enjoyed that. Growing up, I was involved in the construction industry, and so I kind of got a taste of the green building world then in high school. But focus on energy wasn't until after I graduated. And as I started learning more about the field, it just felt like it was right for me. There's a lot of different aspects to it. There's a lot to continuously learn. Energy is not going anywhere, and it's certainly one of the biggest components driving emissions right now. So yeah, that's kind of what fueled me.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And kind of an extension to that question, obviously you've noted what kind of got you interested in the first place and what kind of keeps you going. And I'm curious, over the relatively short period of time that you've all graduated, what have you seen and what are your thoughts around some of the changes occurring within sustainable energy and within the industry, and kind of where you see it going and the opportunities there? Because I think it has changed a lot, and especially since I graduated, it's changed enormously, whether or not on a local level, or a state level, but certainly on a federal level and an international level. But I'm curious, in your experiences so far, how you've seen that change and where you might see opportunities moving forward.
Sure, I can start with that one. I would say all things positive. I think we're trending in the right direction. I think we're getting past the, climate change is a hoax concept and starting to, get into some, positive work. I once heard a quote one time, it was something along the lines of climate change is the biggest economic opportunity of our lifetime. And you could take that a lot of different ways, but I think it means, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot more work to be done in the coming future. And I think it takes all of us to really, chip in, whether it's in our personal lives or professional lives. And I feel like we're trending in the right direction there.
Certainly, yeah.
I know when I was involved at the International District Energy Association, it really became apparent looking at like previous conference proceedings that they had held, and how every single conference we held, there was climate change being like talked about very, very predominantly throughout the entire conference. Now they, like in this industry, it's known to be like natural gas heavy or very fossil fuels. And there's a little bit of a issue trying to shift from that mentality. But a lot of the conversation has been opening up. A lot of people are more likely to talk about it and say, okay, let's really come together and discuss how are we going to make this happen, which is really enlightening to see, because I feel like some people were really against it, or will take the term of resiliency and really use that as just a excuse to keep things going the old way. But now people are realizing, yes, resilience is important, but there's other ways that we can involve these greener technologies, like let's make a microgrid, let's use combined heat and power. And it's really exciting just to see the industry as a whole talk about those so openly.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe add to what Jackie said, and speaking about the technologies, that was a really good point. And I think just adding that they've been more affordable, or they've been getting more affordable, which just makes it more competitive against fossil fuels. And I think that helps make the trends go in the right direction.
Yeah, I would say that long term, the trend is definitely positive from year to year. And I guess if you look at it politically, it's the short term bumps. There might be really positive for a few years and then kind of regress a little bit. So that's kind of, I see that happening. And then sort of on the more focused level, I see that like a big focus going forward is going to be storage, especially with renewable energies. A lot of it is intermittent, meaning, you know, the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. So we need ways to be able to store that energy, even though there's lots of capacity out there. It's not always on. So we got to be able to store that, and we got to be able to store that in sort of a clean and efficient way. So that's definitely something I've focused on a little bit.
Yep. Absolutely. And so let's actually build off of, you know, one of those elements there around affordability, you know, sort of social justice and equity. You know, I know that's an item that comes up, and that I know some of the fellows are certainly focused on with their subject matter is, you know, is equity, and making sure that for this specific subject, right, that sustainable energy is available to a broad amount of people throughout our society. And, you know, how do you, if all three of you are presented with some of those challenges, you know, how do you look to address that concern when it does come to some of the technologies that we do see as the real opportunity areas that will help us adjust our consumption, or where our generation comes from, again, to stick with specific energy generation. You know, how do you guys approach that subject matter? How do you address that if you're presented a question around, well, solar panels are expensive, or, you know, I can't afford to do a retrofit to my house for better energy efficiency, and, you know, how do you guys address those issues or questions?
Sure, I can start there. It's something that's it's been a huge topic lately, and for good reason. And I think it's something that I'm still learning about. And I think one of the things that I've recently learned is that equity doesn't mean equality. So, you know, the example that one of the principals at Cadmus used was, you know, there's a baseball game and there's a 6-foot fence, and equity is giving a step stool to shorter people so that they can see over and get a view of the field. And that's not equal. You know, not everyone gets a step stool. Those that need it do. And so that kind of resonated with me a little bit. And in a professional sense, what I do is, you know, I help push forward programs that are specific for those groups that need that extra support. So I mentioned the Solar Near Community Challenge earlier today, and the Department of Energy put out, you know, a $5 million competition to see which private company could come up with the best ideas to support low to moderate income households. And so it's things like that, you know, you're making a specific targeted effort to bring those groups up.
Great.
I think
Yeah.
sorry, Matt,
No,
working for one of those private companies right now, we're currently working on a geothermal pilot project in Massachusetts, and we're starting to see that become more of a requirement in the project proposals themselves. So right now we're looking at where we should locate sites, and one of the requirements is it needs to include a low-income household to help them jumpstart. Since the utility is going to be doing this project anyways, we really want to help those others and make sure that we include everyone in this project. So while we're looking for it, we're not only looking for energy loads and environmental factors, which you would normally, but there's been a big effort to make sure more people are included in these projects as well. So it's not only helpful for the environment and on an energy standpoint, but to hopefully start to help bring in that social justice issue as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and I would say kind of like in my previous role, I dealt more with that sort of thing, like Anthony. There's a lot of programs out there that to help people of all different sort of income levels, and it really boils down to those programs are sort of a policy thing. Like that money is there, it can be utilized, and you just got to be able to educate people on what's out there and how to get access to it. Especially lower to moderate income individuals don't always have the best access to information. So that's kind of a barrier there. But sort of campaigns to spread that, they're out there. I know like one of the companies that does work sort of in the Upper Valley area of New Hampshire is Vital Communities, and they sort of have these weatherized campaigns and solarized campaigns. So those sorts of efforts to educate people on the resources that are actually there is pretty important.
That's an excellent point. I think education tends to underscore everything that we do, even if you've got somebody who is pretty familiar, including ourselves. I think one of the things that's been critical for my career is I consider myself a lifelong student, always learning. And there will continue to be an enormous amount of change. And I'm sure the panel is involved in that learning every single day of what's new, what's working, again, how can we make things more affordable? And so that's definitely something I think within this subject matter, you kind of have to be a lifelong student and be willing to learn if you're going to do well. And so with that, I'm looking at the time, and I think we're at a point when we'd love to start hearing some questions from the audience, and really let's give them some good questions, some difficult questions. So if anybody has anything, please feel free to put that in the chat or raise your hand, and we'd love to hear some thoughts from you guys. Somebody's got to have something.
Cam always has a question.
Okay, Cam does. All right, so I've got two coming in. Cam, do you want to do yours, or I'll read these real quick?
No, I think the fellows' questions take precedent here.
Okay. So we have two that came in. How do you all account for environmental justice and equity in energy? So certainly, I think we touched upon the general equity question a little bit, but maybe on the environmental side, right? That's also another one of those areas where some of the technologies that may be used still have an impact, maybe not as severe as others, but how do you guys address those concerns?
I could start. I know for a lot of our projects, since we're working with municipalities and just local environments, we have a whole subsection of our company that kind of works with like the Mass DEP for like zoning. We have a lot of environmental scientists on our staff that work closely to make sure we are following all of the local laws and regulations. I know one example is we're putting like a generator near a pond for a local pump station. And before we can even start designing the project, there's a whole group of people that are discussing, is this too close? Are we going to harm the local ecology and things that are in place? I think that answers the question. I know, for instance, will technology placement be the latest form of redlining in neighborhood, like highways and incinerators? Oh, that I'm really actually interested in. I don't have a ton of experience with larger like power plants, incinerators, things like that. But I know in Massachusetts, there's a lot of things in place that companies have to work with, like the local Mass DEP and things like that, to make sure all of those rules are being followed through. I hope that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, no, great question, and certainly a great answer, Jackie. It's complicated because a lot of times when we make initial decisions, we don't know the full long-term impacts, and so certainly with this topic and the need for adjusting our energy supply to more renewable sources, there may be some unintended consequences that do come forward, and we hope that those have been evaluated or accounted for appropriately within the upfront considerations. But yeah, great question, Catherine. And Anthony or Matt, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I'll just add quickly. So a lot of the work that I do is like evaluation based. And I think just having equity be a key component of that evaluation, and that can come in a lot of different forms. But for example, if someone is earning points towards something, and I'm thinking a local government earning certification in the Soul Smart program, for example, we have, did you talk to your utility? Did you work with your waste department? And I think just having another section, have you incorporated equity, and have you worked with your utility to incorporate those policies? Have you worked with your local housing authority? So I think just having it be a key component of the conversation is really important.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Matt.
I guess I would say, just to touch on technology placement, when we start looking at renewables, they're definitely less dense, in the sense that like wind farms are spread out, solar is spread out. So I think that it's not like a coal plant or a nuclear plant where you have one location that can sort of be isolated and spread out and serve a lot of people. It's spread out everywhere, so people kind of just have to get used to that, and that's something that you're always going to fight, and that's really a big planning issue.
Yep, and NIMBY always comes into play, not in my backyard for folks who aren't familiar with that term. From the offshore wind side of things, it seems like a easy solution because we're out in the ocean, and you would think that wouldn't be as big of a problem, but there's always somebody, again, that gets impacted. And in this case, with that technology, it is potentially and likely certainly some level of impact to the fisheries and the fishing community and fishermen. And so even though, again, you think you've accounted for everything, there's usually something that is still left. But again, trying to accommodate for that upfront in putting it as part of the upfront dialogue, to what the panel's noting, is really the important piece in making sure it's considered to what degree that it can be. So let's go to Cassandra. I'm working with Community Power Coalition. What are your thoughts on community power aggregation? Does anybody have some thoughts on that?
So I'll start on that one. So big fan of aggregation. When you buy things in bulk, they tend to be cheaper. I definitely see that in this role. You pay a lot less per unit of energy than a household would, for instance. And as so the university system is looking at bringing in not only the colleges, but also like the technical schools, and they're grouping them together. So one of the concepts that we've looked at and sort of thought about is, okay, can we purchase power in even larger bulk and try to get even better rates? And then sort of the other aspect of that is the environmental piece. So even if your rates and cost of energy isn't that much different, by doing community aggregation, you can make sure that you're buying cleaner energy. So a bigger percentage mix of that energy is coming from hydro or solar or wind. So those are the sort of two main benefits, is the environmental attributes and then also the cost.
And Matt, do you want to just briefly explain what aggregation is, just so that folks who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, certainly. So like community aggregation would be, for instance, a municipality. You can have sort of an opt-in or opt-out program. So an opt-in program, residents have to check a box or decide they want to be a part of it. Opt-out is vice versa. You have to decide you don't want to be a part of it. And then that municipality can then purchase electricity for all of their constituents. And so instead of each individual buying 10,000 kilowatt hours a year, the municipality is buying megawatts. So by buying in that bulk, you get better pricing and you get more options on what you're getting.
Great, thank you. And then Jackie or Anthony, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Matt summarized that well. I would just say, CCA is important if you, or is even more impactful if you have a certain threshold for renewable energy, as Matt was talking about, having that clean energy source coming in, because, if you're just aggregating your energy to purchase dirty fuels, then I wouldn't really recommend that approach. And actually, Mike, I wanted to pose a question to you. New Hampshire is still opt-in, is that right?
With the legislation, let me think about this. Matt actually may know. I believe it is opt out. At least that was the provision that, so I live in Dover, and one of the things, I'm on our energy community, energy commission, and that was one of the sticking points actually for Dover, that we did not want to be, we wanted it to be an opt-in instead of opt-out. But I honestly do not recall, and I apologize, what the result was. Maybe even Cassandra in her work may have the answer to that.
I believe
Yeah,
it was
so-
opt out. Oh,
Yeah, once a municipality forms their community power aggregation plan and actually starts, it's an opt-out. So everyone is automatically in terms of residents.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you, Cassandra. Yeah. And then Jackie, did you have anything on that, or?
Nope, I think Matt and Anthony covered it pretty well.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, and I see Mikey has his hand up. If you want to go ahead and give the question, Mikey.
Hi, everybody. So I have a quick question about, it's really like a personal question, I guess you could say. Where do you each see like the future of energy going? Because we hear talks of like vehicle to grid, distributed generation, nuclear baseload. Like we always hear all these different things, and it's a very place-based issue. So I figure you each have a very unique perspective to offer. I'm just kind of curious what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just quickly from me, I think we have a long road ahead. So I live in Denver, Colorado, and every day train cars full of coal pour into the city, and the city is something like more than 50% powered by coal for the electric grid. And I think, from an outside perspective, you think Denver, you think sustainability, you think, mountains and clean water. And then the underlying energy is mostly fossil fuel. And so I think, we have a long way to go on that front. But like we were talking about earlier, some of those technologies starting to replace those fossil fuels. I think that's a very positive thing. But I think I'll be driving an electric car in my lifetime.
I know our company is in preparation for a lot of these things to start happening and to design for them. I definitely agree. We have a really long road ahead of us to get working, but it's very hopeful seeing all these things. I know with like the infrastructure plan that just came out, a lot of our company is really gearing towards, all right, let's start preparing for what we're going to have to do to help the electrification infrastructure, especially with all of these electric cars that are going to be need charging and kind of making that network. I think on our end, we're starting to do a lot of research and a lot of kind of industry knowledge gathering. And there's a lot of buzz around like people higher up who are really starting to think of staffing, think of training that'll need to be done, and how to prepare ourselves to get this work done, which is good and exciting, but also kind of really puts into perspective of how much work we're going to have to do.
I would say that long term, we certainly need to solve the issue of what is our base energy going to be if we want total clean energy. So like right now with fossil fuels, the energy content is stored in gas or coal. That can be easily transported, can be stored long term. So those are big benefits to it. As we transition to sort of these intermittent renewable resources, we need something that's going to be the base. So whether that's battery storage, one of the sort of new emerging concepts is storing it in hydrogen, which is sort of a clean gas or can be clean. And then you talked about nuclear, and I personally am a big fan of it because we're not producing any emissions, and it allows us to have sort of that base level that we need to sustain the grid, and then we can bring in the other resources as we need them. So I think that's long term what I see as one of the biggest issues.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick too. It's very complicated. I always talk about kind of move the needle where you can. And so, for example, the issue that I work on is offshore wind. The first developments in the Gulf of Maine are not going to occur any sooner than 7 years from now. It's a long way off, but it's very large power generation. Compare that to something in my life that I just got, which was an electric vehicle. I decided to go in that direction because I said that's something that I can do now, and I want to do that. It's complicated though because I also don't have. I just moved into my current house about a year and a half ago. I don't have solar on my house, so I'm drawing power from our regional grid, which the makeup of that is not great right now for renewables, and so we're working on that. But I always recommend take what action you can at the time, whether or not it's small and local, or if you have an opportunity, big and national or international. Work where you can to move things forward. And a lot of those questions around technology will begin to sort of sift their way out. But we need to move where we can now, and that's sort of a big focus. But great question though, Mikey.
Thanks, everybody.
Let's see. Okay, I just got another question from Kathy. Have there been any discussions involving equity in regards to pushing electric vehicles as the solution to reducing transportation emissions, i.e. considering access to them based on their higher costs? Another good question.
Good question. I really wish I knew the answer to.
Yeah,
I don't work too much in the transportation space, to be honest, but I would say, just cleaning up the public transportation energy consumption. So whether that's hydrogen vehicles or electric vehicles, I think that's a really great way to get a lot of people where they need to go in an efficient manner.
Yeah, so I guess touching on your point, Anthony, on campus, we do have a small electric fleet. We have some compressed natural gas vehicles as well. So that's, in the form of public transportation, we're sort of greening that, and that's definitely touches on an equity solution. Yeah, but other than that, I guess I don't deal too much with the transportation piece.
Yeah, it's a big area that needs and is witnessing a lot more attention. There was an effort within northeastern states down into the Mid-Atlantic around creating a similar structure as RGGI to try and cap some of those emissions. I'm not overly familiar with it either, but I think it's similar to other technologies in other ways. Again, like solar power on somebody's house, in PV panels. As over time, the cost will come down. What we're seeing is aggressive public policy, however, with the current administration to create charging infrastructure, which is a big issue. By creating that demand. In the resource to be able to charge and reduce some of the anxiety, the areas of anxiety that consumers have, you're going to see more emphasis. And we are witnessing that as we speak. Every major car maker their vehicles are going to be electric. It's just now we've passed that tipping point, and it's a matter of time. There's still that lag from an affordability standpoint. But there are in other situations as well, different incentives that make it a little easier, not for everybody. But again, I think to Anthony's point as well, and what Matt was talking about, public infrastructure, huge opportunity there, right? Even in certain ways as school buses for kids going to school, updating those fleets, looking at different options, because over the long term, there's opportunities to save money from an operations cost standpoint. And so those are the considerations now that are being applied to these scenarios on the state level, local level, and again, obviously the national level as well. Great, another great question though, and Cam's got one. Let's see what Cam's throwing at us. In Maine, there are now programs from Efficiency Maine that provide much larger financial incentives for those who are close to or below the poverty line, and especially true to EV purchase. So yeah, excellent point, Cam. You know, what needs to occur, I think, too, is the identification of those needs, right? It unfortunately can take a little while, but whenever you roll out something new, you know, initially there was massive industry pushback to electric vehicles. Now we've gotten past that point, but it's still expensive. And there are still concerns with the batteries themselves. And what do you do with the batteries after the fact? And, you know, the considerations of that are now starting to also change the financial impact, where if you can reuse that battery for a different purpose, like a home battery system that doesn't have as much of a cycling necessarily as a vehicle battery would, and other technical needs, you've now got a market after the fact where you can recapture value, and then that gets wrapped into the cost. And so identification is a key item here when these technologies start hitting the market, that can then be improved upon. But that's a good thing, right? I think that's what we need in order to make something market ready, and so that all of consumers can benefit from it. Let's see. Kendall said, curious what final advice the panelists have for our fellows as they're stepping into their professional career. Great question.
Sure, I can take that. I'll say show up and be engaged. You know, a lot of times, I mean, everyone's on the call today, so, you know, you're doing the right thing. But I would say 90% of the people don't show up, you know, to a volunteer event, you know, a non-work sponsored event, anything like that. And I think, you know, show up, be engaged, ask questions. And then the second part is, you know, I'll just say that, like, you know, community is really important to me. It's why I'm here today. The UNH community, UNH family is a great place. And I think we all support one another. And so take advantage of the resources you have. The folks on this call, you know, add me on LinkedIn, ask me for an informational interview. I'm happy to talk to you, and would go out on a limb for anyone, you know, with UNH affiliation. So, you know, take advantage of your community.
I think I agree with all of what Anthony just said. Your community is how you're going to further your career. From my initial connections at the Sustainability Institute, that's how I got where I am now. Just continue building off and asking for people for help and asking questions and becoming more engaged in those opportunities that present themselves. So I think another part of that is always saying yes to those opportunities, whether it's like a small task, helping someone out, or like piggybacking off of your work, what you're doing now. That's how I kept involved with like the UNH Energy office. And from there, now I'm working at pretty close to like my dream job, I guess you could say. And the experiences that you'll get through the way, I think we touched upon it today and not being able to answer some of the questions, but the energy sector is so big that I treasure the time I took at the International District Energy Association, where I got to learn a lot more about policy, about stakeholders, about industry as a whole, and some of the challenges that I've been able to take with me into my technical like experience. Calls like this where I can open my mind again, like listening to podcasts about energy and things that you're interested in. Really just try to not overwhelm yourself, obviously, but to really say yes to everything that's out there, get involved. And you'll be surprised what little bits of information you'll take with you from one small conversation you'll be able to bring into your work.
Great. Real quick, Matt, if you've got, yeah.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is, for right now, looking at your fellowships, they are important, they are impactful. For instance, Jackie's project that she did as a fellow helped pave the way for a thermal energy storage tank that is slated to be constructed next year. So that's going to be a 900,000 gallon cold water storage tank. So what you're doing does matter. It does have an impact. So just know that. And then sort of to piggyback off what Jackie said, it's the experience. Always try new things. Don't be afraid to try something that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone or different, and to network. Because at the end of the day, you always have to be competent and have experience, but really it's who you know that's going to open doors for you. So the more you network and the more you meet people, that'll be the big difference.
Terrific. Thank you guys so much. It was wonderful to have you here today. Round of applause for you guys if we were in an actual room right now, but wonderful perspective. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Keep it up. And with that, I will throw it back to Cameron to close us out.
Well, thanks so much, Michael, and Jackie and Anthony and Matt. Great discussion. I know we're close to time, but I did want to close with sort of 3 observations from the discussion. The first is clearly this energy systems are a huge topic and one that affects us in so many different ways, which was brought up at the beginning. And on top of that, there's a whole suite of challenges and a whole suite of opportunities that comes along with that. And as Michael started with, there's no one particular field, right? We need the mechanical engineers, we need the operations guys on the ground, but we need so many more people. And this is just a field that's going to occupy more of our time. And, Joe Biden said it, Kamala Harris has said it, we got to build back, but we have to build back better. The challenge with the energy system, lots of hard work, Anthony mentioned that, but we got to build the plane while we're flying it. When you do a road, you close down a lane, right? You can't do that with the energy system. Everybody needs energy all the time. And so it is this really huge challenge. The second is I'm just really optimistic coming into this discussion because it's a very different discussion than we would have had 5 years ago, or dare I say even 3 years ago. We're really moving along that evolution, that transition really quickly to where those of us in the field, the professionals, and now the politicians, sort of, we've dragged them along, realize that this has to happen now. And it can't take 50 years, although all the details will, but we need to do it quickly as well. But there's this recognition that we can do this, and there's lots of people focusing on it. And importantly, as one of the panelists said, I forget which one, there's a lot of money to be made at doing this right. And so that's a really good incentive to make it go faster. And then I just want to end by saying this whole notion about showing up is exactly what you've done and exactly what you continue to do. I would argue it's much more than about just your work time. If we're going to transition to sustainability, I really think about this in terms of individuals. We have to change. And so when you're thinking about energy, just ask those questions. When am I buying a car? How am I heating my house? How's my apartment heated? Also, as your family, and then your workplace institution, but also the institutions where you pray and where you play. It's all of those need to change. And that's the influence that you can have across your lifetime. And I really encourage you to take Michael's suggestion is you don't have to change the whole system. You just have to help move the needle a little bit. And if there's millions of us doing that, we're going to move the needle a lot. And really, I just want to say, Jackie, Anthony, and Matt, thank you so much for sharing how you're moving the needle on this topic. And I know we're at time, but Kendall just had a couple of closing remarks as well.
I'll mute myself. So just want to thank again our panelists, Jackie, Anthony, Matt, and our moderator, Michael. It was such an excellent discussion, and we're so happy to reconnect with you all and hear about your amazing work in this space. And also to our fellows always for being engaged and asking questions. We hope you came away today with some more perspectives and are also excited for the rest of your summer as a fellow, but always, once a fellow, always a fellow. So we have one more alumni webinar series. It'll be next week. We'll be focusing on communications for sustainability. So until then, I hope everyone stays happy and healthy, and thanks again, and have a good afternoon.